Hi everyone, welcome to The Raw Show with Michael McDonald, and I have a very special guest. We have Catherine Plano joining me today. Catherine, thank you for being a guest on the show.
You are most welcome. Looking forward to it.
Can't wait. As an start that again. As an international executive coach and creative soul adventurer, Catherine has dedicated her entire life to helping others transform their own lives into greatness. With more than 2 decades of flourishing corporate activities and lead countless renowned companies touching 100,000 lives through spiritual and mental revelation. Catherine's continued her mission of aiding companies and individuals in becoming aware of their limitless potential and using their extraordinary abilities to achieve their desired outcomes. Well, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it, Catherine? To be honest, there's a lot that goes on. I thought we'd start with a bit about you, really, if that's all right. So, would you be able to share with us where you were born and what it was like for you growing up?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in France, in Briançon, which is the south of France. And I was 7 when I came to Australia. My parents immigrated to Australia in Melbourne for work. I still have all my family in France, but I have my immediate family here in Australia. And we moved around quite a lot. So I got very used to not having friends at school and being the new kid on the block. We moved basically, it felt like every year, moving from one place to another for my dad's work. And we grew up in a household where we sat down and had dinner every night together. There was no TV. We didn't watch the news. We didn't have newspapers. And still today, I live that my life like that. I actually don't watch the news. I don't read a newspaper. So we were very much into living life. And I think that's a very French thing, isn't it? Joie de vivre. They know how to live life. And even when I have my cousins that come to Australia, they say, boy, you Australians work so hard, but when you leave this planet you can't take all of this stuff with you. And it's like, yeah, you're so right. And when you go to France, they just enjoy life. And I think that every time I go back and then I come back to Australia, I just slow it down a little pace. But yeah, life has always been, just very family orientated, very close with my family. And I'm a very big family person.
Right. So when did you realise that running a business was for you? Did it always be like that, or did you have jobs previously? What was that like?
No, I think I was an entrepreneur at a very young age. I started very young, so I was into. I've always, and my sister always says, you've always come up with ideas. So when somebody talks to me about something, I'll go, oh, you should start up a business. This, like I'm very creative. So I'm constantly thinking of ways to turn things into a business. I think that's just my natural mindset. So very young, I started a business at a very young age in my 20s, and it was actually a healing center. So I worked with a lot of the etheric stuff, and it was probably ahead of its time. So back then it probably was a bit, and we're talking about years ago, a little bit woo-woo, but now it's very accepted. So if you talk about reflexology, doing meditation, mindfulness, that kind of stuff, very accepted nowadays. But back then, not so much. So, I did start at a very young age, and I think my realization was when I had this healing center, and I did work in a lot of healing centers because I always wanted to help people. That was I knew that was my purpose in life, and there was no doubt in my mind. I was always helping people in some way, shape or form. And having this healing center, I realized that people were very dependent on me, and I really didn't feel like I was empowering them. And I did lots of studies. I studied with lots of different gurus, teachers, shamans, you name it, from all over the world, and for many years. And then I realized that I actually wasn't feeling satisfied when my clients were walking out because they kept coming back in. I wanted my clients to be empowered. So I started delving into neuroscience, neurolinguistics, and really started unpacking the brain and the mindset. And that's how I got to where I am today. So I've been doing that for about 23, 24 odd years. And that's how I help individuals and businesses work with themselves first.
Right. So how do you have the conversations with businesses and and with people that do run their own businesses? Because from the beginning, especially from the outside looking in, it can definitely seem like people have this idea that if we just get the basics right, if we just get the sales right, or the marketing right, or the product or the service right, and the business will just work, it'll just run. Where it's starting, I think it's starting to become more well known now that the mind's becoming more and more and more important. But for someone that might not be at that point yet, do you have those conversations with them or not?
Oh, absolutely. So I always like to tell me a little bit about you first. I want to understand a little bit about their background. Are they, you know, are they their first child, second child, third child? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your hobbies. I really want to unpack the individual, get a bit of an understanding, because we're all conditioned by our environment. So when you think about when a child is first born at its development phase, right up to the age of 7, we're very much conditioned by our environment. Our brain is conditioned by our environment. And what I mean by that is things like what you saw on TV, what you read, the relationships you had with your siblings, your parents, your teachers, all of that makes who you are. And this is our imprinting phase. So I really like to unpack that. And then we go into that next phase of our modeling phase. So who inspired you? And what did you aspire to be at that age of 7 to 14? And that gives me a bit of an understanding of their identity as well. So I really go deep. I do a lot of deep work before I even work on their business, because most of the time what I find is we actually get in our own way of success, or in our own way of business. It's, you know, the marketing stuff and all of that stuff, that's all the fluffy stuff, that's all the surface stuff, but we need to do the deep work. So I'll always start with the individual first, always.
Right. So what does that look like? What does the conversation look like? What does the communication look like? So if someone comes to you and they are quite skeptical of the idea of, whether it be mindset you call it, or spiritual side of things, if they're not really convinced, what sort of conversations do you have, or how do you sort of describe it in a way that makes them understand it a bit better?
So I guarantee my work, and I know there's a big statement, but I do. I actually guarantee my work, because I make sure, as long as the people put in the work and do the deep work, I guarantee your outcome. So, you know, I think that it starts with a discovery session. So a discovery session is really me listening to them and them telling me their story. I need to understand. I have a series of questions that I go through just to get a better understanding. Like, you know, just talk me through your growing years. You know, I'd love to understand that, and talk me through some of those things that stands out for you. You know, growing up, what are those big insightful moments that always plays in your mind that light you up like a Christmas tree? Like, I want to hear about the good stuff as well. Because a lot of the times when you're actually working with individuals, there's always stuff that's getting in their way, you know, and it's maybe from a business point of view, it's maybe not having enough money, always struggling for money. And if I have a look at myself, so I'm happy to share my story. If I have a look at, my parents immigrated from France to Australia, didn't speak the language, worked very hard, almost 7 days a week to make a living. And there was, you know, back in those days, it was one of those things where, you know, I saw my parents work really hard for money all the time. And so if I have a look at my brother and my sister and myself, we have this belief that we have to work hard for our money. So therefore, we work so hard, like to the point where I had burnt out, you know, I had a breakdown in 2011. And that was my big aha moment, because I realized that, why am I constantly working? Because I do love what I do, and that's the trap. When you love what you do in life, it's like you never work a day in your life. But what happens was, I realized that it was this old program that was running in my mind from my imprinting stage when I was 7, because I saw my mum and dad work so hard to earn money that I had this belief that I had to work hard to earn money. And so I had to shift my belief. That was a limiting belief that I had. I had to shift my belief that I just had to work smarter to make money, not so much harder. And I see that same pattern in my brother and the same pattern in with my sister. We just work really, really hard for our money. So that, you know, when you unpack the mind, you can see, and this is why it's really understanding the stories. You know, you can actually have a look at, wow, you know, that had a huge impact on who I am today. And another story I love to share is because I had so much responsibility at such a young age. I was looking after my family at the age of 10. So I was cooking dinners, lunches, making sure my brother and sister went to school. I had so much responsibility that deeply inside of me, there is a resistance to responsibility.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it wasn't until much later in life I realized I had a fear of success. And I linked that to because every time my business went really well or my relationships went really well, I would sabotage it. And I actually linked that responsibility that I had was a bit of a burden. So the success to me was, if you're going to be success in your business, Catherine, there is a level of responsibility that comes with that. And so you can see how this plays out. So it's why it's really important to unpack the mind, because I can't work with the individual on their business if I don't know what's getting in their way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So to have a particular process that you take people through in those initial stages? Have you got maybe a particular set of questions or any of that kind of thing, just so that the people listening might actually be able to take themselves through it and then benefit as a result?
Yeah, so at the start it's a conversation. I don't have a series of questions as per se, because I think that what's really important is it's got to be the conversation has to flow. So the discovery session is a series of questions. Although I do have, you know, before I start working with anybody, I do have questions that for them to ponder over, and some of these questions would be really to get an understanding, what do they want out of this session? Like for working with me, I want them to be really clear about what areas do they want to develop, okay? And also, what will they benefit or gain out of these areas being developed? And then I also ask them what could get in their way, what would prevent them from achieving those goals that they want to achieve. Because I think it's really important to be really clear about, and I'm sure you've heard of the Be Do Have model. Most of us focus on having more money, a more successful business, a better whatever that may be, the outcome. It's always about having. And what that does, that creates us being reactive as an individual. So we're working really hard to have the things we want to have. And how that lets us be is then overworked, overwhelmed, and stressed out. So I like to reverse engineer it. I say, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? Just make it really simple. What do you want to be? And people get really stuck on that, you know, and it might be like, I want to be successful. And I go, let's go deeper. What do you want to be? I just want to be happy. Okay. So if you want to be happy, what does that look like for you? Well, and then they start, you know, listing off all these things that they want to do that make them happy. And in the end, when they're actually just focusing on that one thing, what do I want to be? In the end, they're going to end up having those things they want to have. Does that make sense? Working back the front, like reverse engineering the process?
Yeah, it does, and I quite like the idea of working on the things that are stopping people as well. So, in a lot of conversations that I've had, it's almost like a river or a lake. Like it's going to flow smoother and faster when there's less in the way. You know, when there's less of those like pebbles or rocks in the way, it looks a lot nicer. It runs a lot smoother, and the river flows a lot faster as well. And I quite like the analogy that you drew as well about having to start from what you actually want to be first. And I guess I'd be curious to know if you've experienced anyone or maybe a business that you've worked with that actually struggles with that side of things.
All the time. That's one of the biggest people. When you go, what is it that you want out of life? If people are really, not everyone, but it's an easy question for them to answer because they know what they want to have. I want more money. I want my business to be more successful. I want 10,000 more clients. You know, they can quite easily talk about that. But when you make it as simple as what do you want to be, they do really get stuck. And this is why it's really important when you're actually, looking at that aspect of the individual. We're a human being, right? So we're here to be that, whatever that is for you. And I think that then when they connect with what do you want to be, I then really unpack then what's getting in your way of being what you want to be. And most of the time, when we unpack that, it could be a lack of trust. It could be that, you know, as simple as they've had people people they've cared about and loved very much, that they've had strong connections with, have broken their trust in some way, shape or form. So then their approach is, I don't trust anybody. And how can you go into business when you don't trust people? And that shows up because when you think about how we communicate in three ways. We communicate through our body language, we communicate in the way that we speak, in our tone, and we communicate with our words. The strongest form of communication is our body language, which is 55% of our communication. Now, if I'm about to have a meeting with you, Michael, and then I don't actually really trust you, you're going to pick up on it because that 55% of my body is saying, I don't trust you. And that's that non-verbal communication. And straight away, you're going to go, oh, I don't feel right about this person. So, you know, when people don't have a lot of trust as a whole, they don't connect with people. And then they wonder why they find it really hard to get customers. So then we unpack that. Where does that come from? Where does that belief come from? And how do we shift that?
Right, see, it seems, at least to me, that a lot of these things tend to happen like quite long ago in the past that seem to resurface when the cycle reassociates itself. Like something happens that you associate with something that happened in the past, and then causes certain actions or thoughts to resurface. Would I be right in saying that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Everything, like even some of my clients I've worked with, I've got amazing businesses, you know, amazing businesses and amazing platforms. They worked really hard and they just don't get the money that they want to get, you know. And then when we unpack that, I call them money blocks. So what's that? What's that all about? Talk me through that. You know, where does that limiting belief come from? Well, I always saw my parents argue over money all the time. So in my mind, I thought money was evil. So I don't want to have a lot of money because I don't want to bring that evil into my life, or I don't want to have arguments. So they're actually unconsciously pushing money away because they have this belief that money will bring them arguments. So it does start from your imprinting phase. You know, when we first, our brain was first developed by our environment, and that plays a big part on who we are today at an unconscious level. So we're not even conscious of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This tends to, there was, I can't remember, it was a metaphor or a story or something, I can't remember, where there was two twins that had a father who was an alcoholic and that sort of thing. And then one of them actually followed in their father's footsteps and ended up being an alcoholic and in and out of prison himself. And then his brother didn't touch anything and was teetotal and was healthy all the time and going to the gym and everything. And they both were kind of asked like what caused them to live that way, and they both said their father. So they both had the same experience, but what they took from that experience could be different. So is there anything that you could share on that?
Yeah, I've heard that story too, actually. Absolutely. So I think that there's a lot of things. So, I mean, individually, you don't know. Yes, they had the same father. You don't know what else, what kind of impact impacted their environment. So the relationship with their friends, the relationship with their, their mother and so forth. So one may have been very connected to the father. I mean, you see this with siblings. There's always one that's more connected to the father and the other one's more connected to the mother. So out of those two brothers, one may have been more connected to the mother than the father. I mean, we don't know exactly what went on. And absolutely, it's our perception as a child, So as a child, one would have gone, well, I really love my father. I look up to him, and therefore I'm going to behave like him because he inspires me, and I aspire to be like him. But the other one could have been closer to the mother, and his perception of his father is like, and especially if he was a little bit abrupt towards the mother, the brother would have gone, I actually resent my dad, and I actually don't like the way he's treating my mother. I don't want to be anything like my dad. So there is a lot more depth I have heard that story, but there's a flip side of that. We don't know what happened, at that age. We don't know the full story. That's just, once again, the surface story.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it echoes for I guess myself and listeners as well, that you do actually have to go deeper in order to get clearer as well. Like, because from the outside looking in, you could just say, oh well, I learned from my family that money might be hard to earn, or whatever happens to be, using your example. But you've got to go deeper before you can actually do anything with that, because you can have that information, but that doesn't actually help you in terms of, okay, well, what can I actually do about this? So what certain things do you know that might actually benefit people when you have that situation where people might know these sorts of things, people might know all the belief side of things, but that doesn't actually help them when it comes to actually doing something about it. And I use this story or analogy as well, where it's like, so something's actually worse when you know it's happening. So it's like being fully aware that you're going to get hit by this football makes it worse than actually not knowing that you're going to get hit by this football. So if people are actually aware of what's happening, they're aware of their beliefs, they're aware of what's affecting them, but they can't do anything about it, what advice would you have for those people?
Yeah, so if we stay on the same topic, for example, as I was saying before, like with money, one of my clients, the whole money thing, a money block. Sometimes, and how this works out is, what do we do about it? So, for example, it could be that, obviously if you had been brought up in an environment where there was arguments around money, you might think that money has a belief that money brings arguments. But then sometimes it's a self-worth thing, like some people actually feel uncomfortable about receiving money. So, they're the type of people that will do things for free, or, the people pleasers, or I'll do this for 50%, or they give their time away, right? And so what I like to do is, like, what is that unconscious belief, or even my one, like I said, I sabotage. So every time my business was successful, or I had money, I didn't ever felt comfortable, because I thought that there was a lot of responsibility that came with money. So I used to always sabotage money, and found it really hard to save money. So my unconscious belief, if I unpack that, was saving money was too hard, because once again, my parents, I saw them work really hard, but I don't know that they saved money. And so if my belief was that saving money is too hard, my unconscious thinking would be, I am not good at saving money, right? And then my unconscious behavior would be, I would be impulsive with my money. So, and this actually happened. I used to buy clothes every week. And the result is I never had enough money to pay my bills, or my credit cards were always over the top. Mm-hmm. So then what we do is we do this thing where we do a 21-day focus. So it takes 21 days to create new neural pathways in the brain. And that's 21 consecutive days to create new neural pathways. It takes 44 to build muscles, and 66 to embed it. So you embed a new behavior or a new belief. So then once we understand unconsciously the belief, the thinking, and the behavior, what I then do is let's work at the conscious level. So if we were to flip that and reverse engineer it, you could say, okay, saving money is easy and necessary. Okay, then how I would think is then I am good at saving money. And my behavior, what I did, and this is true, I really did, I actually opened up an ING account where I had money coming out of my account every week. So I didn't see it. So well, my result was I was actually increasing my bank balance and saving money and started to feel confident. And I did that for 21 days. So as you can see, when we unpack unconsciously what's going on at that deeper level, we can start working consciously and shifting those limiting beliefs.
Yeah, it definitely seems to me, at least, that the more clearer we are around the beliefs and the thoughts that we're having and all of those kinds of things, it makes the actions that we take a lot easier, and you're more likely to take the right actions as well. Because there are so many people that it's almost like they're trying to take loads of action. They're trying to, just do the work, and there's this big hustle movement going on at the minute amongst entrepreneurs, and it gets to a point where sometimes it's better to just take like 3 very, very clear action steps rather than trying to like fill your day with like 20 hours worth of work and all of those kinds of things. It does give the impression that it's starting with the inner work that does make the life easier in long term, at least.
Oh, absolutely. And a good point you just brought up then, Michael, was that it is about working on your business, not in your business, because I think as entrepreneurs and as business owners, we like you said, we hustle. We're right in it. We're in the business, and that we actually don't stop and step back and actually pause and actually look at what's really going on. And I think that was my big aha moment too, is that when I stepped away from my business and actually was working on my business instead of in my business, wow, what a shift in my perception. And it shifted to how I was doing my business as well. I wasn't just, working stupid hours and chasing my tail. I was actually being more strategic about my approach. And, it's like, even like for now, I can actually turn around and say no. And that took me years because I know strategically what my plan is for this year, and I'm going to stick to it instead of saying yes to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so you mentioned that it takes 66 days, I think, to embed something in the brain in terms of like making things a habit. Is there a reason why it takes that long?
Well, it's just from neuroscience research. You can look 21 days. If you do it for 21 days, you're starting to create a shift. So, and then it becomes habitual. Anything that we do over time and honor and repeat it over and over again, it actually just makes it a habit with anything that you do. It's like going to the gym. And I think that, quite often I'll always say, when I run some sessions, I do this analogy like stand up if you've ever bought gym equipment or a gym membership, and everyone stands up. Okay, stay standing up if you've actually built muscle from your gym membership or your gym equipment. Some people start sitting down. So you can see that initially when we have this great idea that I want to get fit or healthy or lose weight, we get into it. But we don't really, we're not strategic about it. We just dive into it. And I think a lot of businesses do that. They just dive into it, right? And then I'll say, remain standing up if you continue to build muscle from your gym membership and gym equipment today. And a lot of people sit down. Very rarely do I have a person that stands up. And the whole purpose of this exercise is that you can see how much forward thinking, how much planning went into ahead of time. And also what they did is, I think that what we don't do as businesses, we dive into ideas, but we don't look at the consequences of what could get in our way or stop us from achieving what we need to get. And I think if we don't have the consequences or understand what the consequences are in everything that we do, that means we don't have a plan B. And that means that we can fall flat on our face. So I think it's really important that, this is going back to working on your business instead of in your business. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would completely agree with that, Catherine. It does just seem that it does seem almost like it's more about quality over quantity now. Like when we've had this conversation now, we're probably around half an hour now, and it does definitely seem to me like we're trying to increase the quality of the actions that we're taking rather than just taking as many actions as we possibly can. Are there any other ways that you can think of that can help us increase the quality of our actions?
Yeah, I think really important, and what I do with a lot of business, have a business plan. My business plan I built years ago, 9 years ago, and it's changed over time, but it's like my Bible. If I don't have a business plan, and you'd be surprised how many businesses and entrepreneurs do not have a business plan. And if you don't have a business plan, and then you want, maybe say you're in a situation where maybe you want to find partners or investors, they want to see a business plan. They want to see that you've actually sat down and been strategic about your business and actually looked at it in a methodical way, from marketing to finance to even having an exit strategy. Which a lot of it, which still, it just, for me, I get still surprised how many businesses and entrepreneurs don't have a business plan. They've just had this great idea, dived into it, and haven't looked at the consequences or the financials or the marketing or even done any research about their competitors or what's out there. They've just come up with this idea and just jumped into it. And I did that myself too. I actually did that exactly about 10 years ago. I actually had this idea, went into it, and then realized, hang on a minute, I'm diving into something that's completely new. Back then, like 10 years ago or more than 10 years ago, coaching was quite, I mean, it was starting to get big, not like now, and you can get a coach in everything. But I had to strategically think about where to from here, because I did work in a corporation. I worked with large corporates, and I was getting a lot of money. So for me to leave my $150,000 a year to zero, I had to plan ahead. I had to, and I did. I strategically planned. I gave myself 12 months to save up a certain amount of money, and I gave myself 12 months to actually build my business. And because I thought, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, I have to go back and get a job. And that was the biggest learning lessons for me, because I didn't have a marketing department to back me up. I didn't have a sales department to sell my products or my services. I had to do it all by myself. So a business plan is key, really important to have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if anyone's listening that's unsure about like whether a business plan will help, then the best thing that you can do is to get as far as you can on it as well. Like there are loads of places where you can download like others. You know, I think there's one on government websites as well. Like they all have those kind of resources, and just get as far as you can. You know, like when I put mine together, sometimes it's hard to actually predict certain things, because you sort of look at the questions and go, I'm not going to know what I'm doing in 10 years, but it's good just to, even if you just get ideas down, even if it's almost like journaling, you just write everything down as much as you can, even if you only do half of it, you've still done the work, you know?
Yeah. And, even so, like some people go, I don't have to do business plan, because, there is a lot of work involved in that. Like I like to work quite diligently on a business plan, but I say, okay, just let's focus on 5 things. Just 5 things. The first thing is, how I say, what do you want to be? It's like, that's a mission statement. So your reason for being here. So what you want to do, be very, very clear about what you want to be. So that's your mission. And then work on your vision. Why are you doing what you're doing? The big picture. So mission, vision, and then your positioning statement. Describe how you do what you do and for who. So then we can start at the market. It doesn't have to be a big business plan, but at least understand, how you're going to do it. And then a value proposition, maybe one sentence that conveys the value of what you do for your customers. And then a tagline, something that's quick, catchy statement that people always remember you by. So that's even that. If you don't want to do big business plan, do those 5 things at least.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're at a point where we probably need to use the no stone unturned method now, Catherine. So we're at a point where if there's anything that you think that we need to mention or that we need to talk about, or that you think is probably something that is important that we've not quite covered yet? What else is there around having the spiritual or woo-woo side, and how it can impact people's businesses and companies as well?
Yeah, so it's I love the way you call it woo woo, and it is woo woo. I call it woo woo all the time as well. It's just, it sounds better with your accent, of course. So for me, I actually wrote my second book, and it's actually called The Workplace Alchemist, which is a pathway to wisdom for the curious leader. Because what I used to do, as I explained before, I did all that woo-woo stuff, and I kept it very separate. And then when I got into more of the science stuff and the neuroscience stuff, I got it really separate. And it's only been last year, so last December, that I actually wrote this book, that I actually thought they merged together, because now we have a lot of like quantum physics. We have a lot of support that backs up a lot of that stuff. And I think that it's really important to bring back a little bit of magic into our day. You know, and it could be as simple as, you know, in a business, I always talk about, let's get into that intuition. Like, how often do we get a gut feeling about something and we ignore it, you know? And from a business side of things, you know, I know people, some are entrepreneurs, very intuitive, and always listen to their gut feeling and make decisions, business decisions, on their gut feeling. And it's when you do the deep work, that inner work, you become more sensitive to your environment. And, you know, it doesn't have to be too woo-woo. Like, you know, you don't have to have the crystals out and the big, you know, the bells and all that kind of stuff. But it's about doing that inner work. So I always talk about meditation is really important. There's a lot of science around, and that supports why meditation is important as a business owner. But also follow their gut feeling, your intuition. The more that we follow our intuition, the greater it becomes. And it's almost like, I always call it, it's my almost my apprentice that works with me, you know, because it's always telling me, Catherine, you can go this way. Or hang on a minute, if I don't feel right about it, I go, look, can I sit with this and get back to you tomorrow? And then when I've got that time, I actually sit aside and I might journal. I'm a big writer. I love writing. But journaling unpacks what I'm thinking as well. And then I'll realize that, hang on, I'm not feeling right about this because it's not aligned with my 3 goals that I've set for myself this year. And I made a promise to myself that I'm not going to get derailed this time by other ideas that come into my you know, into my presence and think they're better or shinier. I'm going to stick to my guns. So I think that intuitively we need to get into do that inner work, you know, whether it's practice mindfulness, to be able to step back and actually think about, what am I thinking, what am I feeling, and how am I showing up? I think we don't do enough of that in business.
Yeah, it was well put, really, because I think a lot of people look for the answers from the outside. Like they all look to try to see what other people have done, or they look for mentors, or whatever the case is, which can help. But you need to understand that there's also value in listening to yourself to try and find the way that works best for you. And then just getting back to what you said earlier about, you know, who you want to be. It's like, if you start from that place, I mean, this is more just me thinking out loud, to be honest, is it gets to a point where you might actually get to a different outcome. So if you go like, what do you want? Well, I want more clients. But if who you want to be is happier and maybe a bit more peaceful, a bit less stressed out, well, you having 10 clients might actually make you more stressed out and maybe more unhappy. But if you start from the place of, I want to be happy and more peaceful and less stressed out, you might get to a different outcome as a result.
Absolutely, because you know what, we're actually, I always say we're like, if you think about our emotions is energy, emotion, and that's our strongest form of energy, right? And this is a magnetic force to your thoughts. This is the energy that connects with like-minded atoms in our planet. And this energy is what manifests your thoughts, your ideas and beliefs into reality. So, you know, from a vibrational point of view, we are, and quantum physics proves that now, that what we think and what we believe, we attract. So, you know, this is why it's important to, you know, to step back and go, what am I feeling? What am I vibrating right now? Because I always look at my environment to give me a clue of what's going on inside of me, because I know I'm projecting that into my environment. So if things aren't working out as planned, I'll go, okay, now it's time to do some deep work, because I'm getting in the way here, and I need to understand, what am I doing to push this away now? So it starts with you always. It's you know, whatever you believe at that deeper level, you're attracting. You're like a magnet in this universe. You're attracting whatever you vibrate.
Yeah. There's only so much that I could say after that, Catherine. It was well put. Right, so we are getting close to the end now, and I thought we would touch on a few things just before we finish, just to end off on a high note. Do you have any particular books or resources for our listeners that they can use if they want to find out a bit more about, maybe it could be the work that you do, or it could be the things that we've spoken about? So I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so I do have my book. My book is Getting to the Heart of the Matter. It's actually a workbook. So it's everything that I talk about, you can actually do for yourself. There's lots of activities in the book that you can unpack your own mind. And I know it's helped a lot of people and business owners as well to really unpack. And I've had some of the feedback is, wow, I now understand. I had this big aha moment. I now understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and why my business is not working out the way that I want it to work out. So I would say Getting to the Heart of the Matter is something that would help. Like I said, it's a workbook. So everything from questions to activities that I do with my clients are in that book. So it's a fun book. And if you like a little bit of woo-woo and want to be the master of your own energy, I do have my second book coming out probably later on in the year called The Workplace Alchemist. But there's lots of books. You know, I'm really big into self-help books. I think for me, the reason I put this book together a couple of years ago was, you know, for me it was about, you know, getting colourful in your book, you know, get a highlighter, you know, write it all out, draw it out. You know, I think a workbook is the best way to unpack your mind.
All right, awesome. And just before we finish, where can people go if they want to find out a bit more about you and what you've got going on?
Sure. So you can check out my website, Catherine at CATHERINE Plano, PLANO.com. And you can find me there. There's a lot of free stuff. There's, you know, lots of free programs, lots of things I write every week. So I do that because I like to inspire and empower people that like to read. But there's a lot of free stuff on there.
All right, awesome, Catherine. Well, we've got one last question. I ask all my guests this, and it's, what would you like the world to know about you that it doesn't already know?
The world to know about me that I think it's, for me, it's really about making a difference. So I think, you know, I talk about it, and it's funny, in my meeting just last week, we were just saying, how do we get to explain exactly what we are all about? And I think for me, I believe in global consciousness, and I don't know if anybody else has heard of it, but I really believe that the more people we help tap into their potential power, the more the population will become awake to a consciousness shift towards the global mindset for the betterment of all humankind. So I think the more people that we can help, not just ourselves, but when we get those aha moments or those insights, if we can share that with others, we're actually helping the world be a better place from a global consciousness point of view. So I think that it's about, not just about, I want people to understand we're here to make a difference, but for them to help us make a difference by sharing their knowledge as well.
Well, Catherine, I think that is probably the best way to end. Thanks for being a guest on the show. Really appreciate you carving out the time, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so very much, Michael, for having me on the show. It's been awesome.